Hello. This week, people asked for nutrition as the video content. So, what I want to focus on was fat, as in the macronutrients. The reason I want to focus on that is that I've had a fair few nutrition clients who seem a bit unsure about how to deal with fat, how to include it in a diet. And it does seem to, due to the way the media promotes nutrition, which is fairly bad the way they do it, um, fat gets demonized when it shouldn't. It is a very, very important part of your diet. So that's what we're going to discuss today. Um, Now, the main reason that fat gets avoided, sorry, just fixing that with a bit of hair, is because in terms of the macronutrients, it is the most calorie dense. So if you know anything to do with macronutrients or calories, you'll already know this. But protein has 4 calories per gram. Carbohydrates the same, 4 calories again. Whereas fat has 9 calories per gram. So as you can see, it's over double the other two. So that does mean that you will have a smaller portion compared to the other two, but it doesn't mean it's got to be completely minimized. So let's say you're following this channel, so you're probably into powerlifting or some kind of strength sport. So what you'd want to be doing in terms of diet is having your protein at roughly between 0.8 gram and 1.2 gram per pound. Now I know that annoys most English people, which is fair enough. I can't quite work it out without the calculator right now what that is in kilo, but if you weigh 100 kilo, your protein's going to be about 220 gram, which, as you can tell, is 880 calories. So from there, the next thing you'd work out is how much fat to have, and then the carbohydrate to fill the rest of whatever your calories should be. I'm not going to go too much into this because it's not really necessary. But in terms of fat, you want that to be 25 to 35% of your diet. You could also work it out as, in a similar way to the protein, you can work it out as zero point 0.4 to zero point 0.6 gram per pound. Again, it's in pounds, I know, I'm sorry. But that's the way I work it in my head. I do the calculation as well. So, yeah, I know, I apologize. But as you can see, 25 to 35% is massive. A lot of people would automatically err to go 20% due to like the old 70s and 80s bodybuilder diets, which were 40% protein, 40% carbohydrate, 20% fat, which isn't dangerous, but it's also not ideal and it wouldn't work for everyone. There's some people that it would work for, but as a whole, it's not just a good cookie cutter ideal to go for. So, in terms of the amount of fat you want to be eating, will be 25% to 35% as a rough rule of thumb. Now, men tend to do better on lower fat, so they would probably be more like the 25 to 30 range, whereas women tend to be more 30 to 35%. Now it's because we're made differently, basically. So if you're biologically female, you will find that hormone production is massively different to if you're a biological male. The obvious differences between testosterone and estrogen. So you want to make sure that you are getting enough for your gender, your training, and just your general maintenance. It's different for each person. So if you're bigger and you've been training for longer, you are likely going to have more calories in general and therefore more fat. If you're a big male who's used to training, you're going to have more. You're going to have a medium amount of fat really. Whereas if you're a fairly muscular woman who's been training for a while, your fat content could be quite high comparative to your diet. So keep in mind that calorie wise, it all depends on the person. So if you've got a well trained large man, he might have 30% of his fat, but that could still be 100 gram of fat. Whereas a well trained woman who is fairly muscular might only have 70 gram, but that could be 35% of the calories. It just depends on how many calories they have and what works best for them. There's a lot of experimentation with it, which is why people pay for nutrition coaching. Um, but I also want to discuss the actual benefits of fat, because a lot of people think, oh, it's okay, I'll make up for those carbs and those calories of carbs or protein, which is fair enough. But really, if you're gonna focus on the macronutrients individually, you need to know what they all do. So in terms of fat, I've got my precision nutrition textbook open next to me just so I don't forget anything. So as I said, it's the most calorie dense, so it has the most calories, which means it has the most energy. So I know a lot of people try to avoid high calories, but if you're training, you need calories to train, you need that energy. If you don't have that, you're not going to train as well, you're not going to compete as well. So these things need to be taken into account. The next thing is, as I mentioned before, well, I briefly touched on hormones. When it comes to creating those hormones within your body, you need fat content to be there to encourage that. Mainly the sex hormones and the corticosteroid hormones, which is stress type stuff. So if you don't have them, your hormones going to be a bit out of whack. You might find that you're getting more tired easily. You might find that you are struggling in terms of sex, in terms of too much stress. So this is where it comes in. It is very important, as you can tell. Like if those things aren't happening, then you're probably having a bad time. So what else have we got? We've got, it helps to form the cell membranes. It helps to form our brain and nervous systems. It helps with absorption of certain vitamins, the fat soluble ones like A, D, E, and K. Have I got that right? Yeah, that's right. So yeah, they're the main ones. So if you're looking at what type of food to go for in terms of fat, because there are different kinds of fat, but you shouldn't really worry too much about that right now. If you're like really into a bodybuilding diet and you really need to focus on each thing, or if you have a particular health problem that needs to mitigate these things, then you'd look more into that. But for now, generally just go for fat overall. So your main sources of it are going to be nuts, avocados, dairy, eggs, fish, some kinds of meat, not so much poultry, mainly more like beef, pork, and lamb. Things like oil as well. Like there's classic examples of bodybuilders just taking shots of olive oil or putting it in the protein shake just to get the fat content up. It is a really easy way to consume fat, but not the nicest way. So it's it's not really something you want to do. But while we are talking about nutrition as well, in terms of macronutrients and calories, if you are a beginner to it, all you need initially, I was going to say the best way, but it's not necessarily. What you need initially to take the pressure off yourself from counting everything is if you focus on calories and protein first. If you get those two things right, you'll make a lot of progress. Once you get a bit more into it, or you find that progress has halted a little bit, or I don't know, or you're just not feeling as well as you could do, then you will look at the actual makeup of the carbohydrates and the fat. It's very unlikely that you're eating too little fat so that your hormones are quite low, unless you're actually planning to eat so little fat. So if you were to just focus on the protein and you were eating things like beef, fish, nuts, you're likely getting enough fat as well. But obviously, it depends on the person. It depends on how you're eating. If you're just eating, I don't know, just chicken for your main source of protein and not really anything with it, maybe just like rice and veg, then you're probably not getting enough fat. But in terms of actual calories and macronutrients, the main ones to focus on initially is calories overall and protein. And as I said at the start of the video, if you're training, you want to have about 0.8 gram to 1.2 gram per pound. Again, I know that'll annoy you, I'm sorry. But it's a really good marker. It's a good way to go. And with that as well, while I mentioned the 0.8 to 1.2, if you are cutting, you'll want to have more protein. So that is when you'll be on the 1.2 end of that scale. The 1 to 1.2 end, I apologise. Because the thermic effect of protein will encourage more fat loss. And also the amount of protein, the high level of protein will mean that your muscle mass will maintain better, particularly if you're training quite well. If you're not training as well, it will affect it. But I imagine if you are cutting and hoping to maintain muscle mass, you will be training. Now, if you are maintaining or bulking, you don't actually need as much protein. It wouldn't hurt to have 1.2. It might just be a bit of overkill. You might just prefer to have carbohydrates instead, though. So you might be swapping a little bit of extra chicken so that you can have, I don't know, maybe a dessert or something. If you're bulking, why not? Also, if you're not bulking, why not? If you fit it in, it's fine. But that will allow you to digest things a bit easier. It's also easier to eat large portions of carbohydrates than it is protein. It's much more difficult to eat loads of chicken breast than it would be to eat loads of chips or rice. And yeah, by saying chips, that is me showing my preference. But yeah, I think mainly that's what I wanted to discuss was overall calories and fat in particular. Because as I said, I've had a few clients who seem a little bit concerned about trying to eat it and trying to get more in the diet. Generally, if you look at it and if you're, if you go by how heavy you are and then compare that with how much fat you're having, it's probably not that high. A lot of people seem to think that any fat is too high, and it doesn't really work like that. I just thought of something else, then I've forgotten it. Oh, so if you are first, go back to the calories and macronutrients at the start. If you are first getting into calories and you are overweight or have a high percentage of body fat and you are wanting to lose that, firstly, calories is the best way to go, depending on, regardless of however you do it. But what I would suggest is rather than going for 1 gram per pound, it would be 1 pound of lean body mass. So if you can roughly work out what your body fat percentage is, and then go 1 gram per pound of what that lean mass is, that would be the easier way to go. It also means that if you are 300 pounds, that you're not eating 300 gram protein, which is difficult. If you work out that you are about 30% body fat, then it means that you're eating less protein already because you're just going for that lean mass rather than the overall one. As you can tell, I couldn't figure out what 70% of 300 pounds was because it's just 210. Never mind, 210 grams rather than 300. So that's how you would do it. So to sum up, calories are the most important thing, followed quickly by protein. Once you get more into that, check out the carbohydrates and the fat. The fat should be 25 to 35%, or 0.4 to 0.6 gram per pound. So if you're 100 pounds, which you wouldn't be 100 pounds, let's say 200 pounds, it'd be 80 to 120 gram of fat, which might seem quite high already, because I know a lot of people, once it gets past 80-ish, they seem to start getting concerned. But also there's a lot of people who are over 200 pounds. And then whatever's left after you've worked out your calories, your protein and your fat, you fill with carbohydrates. A lot of the time that will be the biggest chunk of it, depending on what you're doing with your diet. If you're in maintenance or bulking, it's probably going to be the biggest chunk. If you're cutting, it's likely to be the smallest. So then from there, you then have, as I said, if you are overweight or classed as obese, I don't mean this in a judgy way, by the way, I just mean in a literal fashion, then you should go for the marker point is said, but per pound of lean body mass rather than just body mass. And yeah, and I'm not going to sum up all the benefits of fat again because that's earlier in the video. You can just rewind. So basically, eat well, enjoy yourself. So thank you.